Retro game systems have many aspects that make them incredibly fun to collect for and play. Some of those experiences can be damn near priceless, and intertwined with the best times and memories that make us who we are. But it's also nice to see something new every so often with retro gaming, and there are talented individuals within our community that make sure that happens. Homebrews, color and sound hacks, language translations, and even ports of games never released have become an enjoyable part of exploring old game systems. In this episode, we will be going over some of my personal favorite hacks and modifications available for the Sega Genesis. Some of these can be as simple as correcting color, while some radically change an experience of a game. I hope you guys enjoy awesome Sega Genesis hacks and translations. When it comes to crimes against a fan base, few rank as high as Sega of America's butchering of Bare Knuckle 3 for the Sega Genesis. Localized as Streets of Rage 3, it saw radical alterations to story, censorship, and even characters being scrubbed that weren't acceptable during its time. They even made the game harder, something that it really didn't need. This leads us to one of my favorite hacks for the Genesis, Bare Knuckle 3 in English. Now you can play this awesome game the way it was originally meant, complete with an accurate story, proper characters, and a manageable difficulty for even the most casual gamers. Everything here has seen a proper English makeover, including the opening story, mid-game cinemas, and the attract screen bios for each character. You retain the original colors of the main characters as well. Streets of Rage 3 always had excellent gameplay, so you get that fully intact as well. If you have never played the game with this hack, I highly recommend it. Streets of Rage 3 came out at a time when Sega liked messing around with localizations of some of its games, and we really got the raw deal on the original. This hack gives us the game we should have gotten back then, and it's well worth your time. I've always been a big fan of golf games. Even as far back as the NES, I remember having great fun with the sport. One of the games I imported from my Mega Drive back in the day was Battle Golfer Yui, a Japanese exclusive I picked up because it was incredibly cheap. It had a story mode I couldn't follow, but its base arcade mode was simple and easy to get into. Luckily, we have a full English translation of the game today, allowing many of us new to that experience to finally see just how batshit crazy the game was. The story is basically about an evil scientist trying to take over the world with golfers, brainwashed agents placed in tournaments to sow deceit and dissent around the world. Truth be told, I still don't know what the hell is going on half the time. The story is completely bonkers and the dialogue is crazy at times. What I do enjoy is the actual game of golf here. Simple and easy to navigate menus make this feel a bit like Neo Turf Masters, another game of golf worth playing. Courses are often themed with things like baseball fields and cemetery designs that make navigating them tricky. You do have the ability to use magic-like special powers to allow more control over the ball and where you want it to go. There's nothing here realistic, and the crazy story will either intrigue you or turn you off completely, but if you like arcade-style golf experiences, I recommend you take a look at this one. In early 1992, the Genesis received a cool little strategy game called Warsong. It used turn-based combat to progress its story scenarios and wasn't a bad game at all if you enjoy the genre. Of course, being on a console dominated by arcade and sports fans going crazy over a supersonic hedgehog, Warsong did not find much of an audience. In Japan, it had been known as Langrisser, and it was far more popular there. Part 2 hit the Japanese Mega Drive in mid-1994 and never left the country. Many years later, I discovered an English patch for the Japanese ROM, finally giving me a chance to play this on my Sega Genesis. And you know what? Much like Warsong, this is a pretty damn good turn-based strategy game. Much of the story actually unfolds during the battles, playing out in between each turn. The story is what you would expect in a JRPG. Conflicts are tearing apart the land and its people, and there is treachery afoot. Each battle presents conditions for victory and defeat, then allowing you to prepare your units and generals for the best possible attack plan. This one can be tough, but has a really good flow of story and combat that keeps things interesting. The visuals aren't particularly spectacular, but I do like many of its music tracks. If you liked Warsong, it's a must-play. I enjoyed Mortal Kombat 2 on the Genesis. I thought it played well and it had much of the appeal that made the arcade version so great. There is no denying, however, that there are a great many things missing in this port. Sound effects, speech, cinemas, endings, and a lot of concessions were made to fit it into such a tiny cartridge. Mortal Kombat 2 Unlimited set forth to change much of that reality. It aims to put back in what was lost from the arcade and so much more. It puts back in the original arcade intro, the original endings, many of the speech samples, and adds even more stuff like stages and music from the first Mortal Kombat, elements from Mortal Kombat 3 like running and combos, and even makes bosses and hidden characters selectable right from the start. It's almost like the Super Turbo version of the original game. Although it lacks the color upgrades found in the 32X version, this hack brings the Genesis game much closer to that experience. There's even a color hack you can add on top of this that makes the characters look more like their arcade counterparts.
Round 2. Fight! Finish him. Kung Lao wins. Fatality.
I saw Rena-Hero in a few Sega-related projects back in the day, but never had a chance to give the Japanese Mega Drive version a real play due to the language barrier. That all changed with a complete English translation, now allowing me a chance to see the origins of this peculiar superhero. The story here is complete nonsense, of course. You order food for your family and accidentally sign up for an experimental superpowered suit program. You then get missions to go and help townsfolk with whatever problems they have. Stop robberies, bullies, and bank robberies to earn gold so you can pay the rent on the suit, fund upgrades, and build a savings account for all that life throws at you. I don't consider this one a must-play, but if you have seen Rena-Hero in some of Sega's other games, playing this one might take care of that curiosity. It's an easy-to-play game otherwise, not incredibly long, and just zany enough to hold your attention for a while. When I first began messing around with homebrew and hacks 20 years ago, the quality left a lot to be desired. They were often messy, bug-ridden affairs that you could easily live without. It's amazing how tight these projects have become over the years, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of Rage is an excellent product to show that. Starring our favorite heroes in a half shell, you can take Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael across the world of Streets of Rage 2. You'd think that the mashup of gameplay here would result in hitbox inconsistencies that would make the gameplay kinda wonky, and you'd be wrong. This plays phenomenally well. You hit enemies where you expect to, the throws and special moves feel great, and it's just an all-around joy to play. The sprites of the turtles look great, right down to each attack animation looking like it belongs in the engine. The funny thing is, many of the elements in Streets of Rage 2 look like they belong in a kung fu movie anyway, so nothing really looks out of place. Sometimes these crossovers work out like a champ, and this one is definitely worth owning. I'm even thinking about a dedicated repro cart for this one. One of the great things about homebrew projects is that sometimes they set out to right a wrong that never should have been. During its life, the Sega Genesis got a really bad reputation for not being able to do proper digitized speech. Many games sounded scratchy and tinny, often well below the stuff we heard on the Super Nintendo. Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition and Super Street Fighter II are often called upon as chief examples of just how broken digitized speech samples are on the Genesis. Lucky for us these days, we have a way of showing just how completely full of shit that idea is. The Street Fighter Sound Fix takes the unimpressive samples from the original release and clears them up exceptionally well. This sounds so much better, it will likely take many of you by surprise. Everything from simple grunts and groans to Ryu shouting Hadouken now sounds as it should. Even the once ear-piercing elephants on Dhalsim's stage are far more tolerable. There is also a color hack that can be applied that brings things closer to the arcade. These two patches together show you what we should have gotten from Capcom back then, proving that just because a game was ported between systems, they were rarely ever given the same level of priority. Resources, developer skill with the hardware, time constraints, and behind-the-scenes motivations played a huge role in how these ports turned out. These hacks are available for both Special Champion Edition and Super Street Fighter II, bringing them up to where they should have been all along.
Round 2, 1. Hadouken, 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 Hadouken.
I was always a big fan of both Final Fight and Streets of Rage back in the day. While system defenders were locked in arguments over the two constantly, I made the effort to play and enjoy them both. So when I ran across the Final Fight crossover for Streets of Rage 2, I just had to play it. Like I said in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of Rage segment, I expected this one to feel really weird and not play all that great. Wrong again, because this is another hack that just nails everything to feel like a complete experience. The sprites look fantastic, the animation is perfect, and the combat is spot on accurate in every way. I dare say that had Streets of Rage never existed and this was called Final Fight 4, nobody would have batted an eye. Weapon play, special moves, and grab attacks all feel as they should, and Hager even has his POW driver to complete the feel. Streets of Rage 2 again provides a perfect backdrop for these characters to do combat in, and if you know the source intimately, you'll drop right in and won't miss a beat. The only out of place element here is Chun-Li, mainly because her Street Fighter II sprite and animations just not looking the best when everything else is so perfect. Most of the time shoot 'em ups are easily imported and enjoyed no matter what their language is. Most have simple cinemas at best, usually the ship taking off and starting you on your journey. Advanced Busterhawk Lai Lancer was nothing of the kind. It had gorgeous cinemas that opened up the game, rivaling CD-based content in quality of art and color. I never knew what any of them were saying back then and always wondered what was going on in these great scenes. Now with the English patch for Lai Lancer, these exquisite scenes are now even more enjoyable, with a fully translated story that covers the opening cinema, the mid-stage scenes, as well as the ending. I've always enjoyed this game and found it to be a great addition to the library. The music is top-notch as well, cranking out stuff that makes everything happening on screen more appealing. The Genesis has a great shoot 'em up library, and you'll already likely have this one among your ROMs or on your EverDrive. Be sure to grab this hack and get it patched up to take an already great game and make it a little better. A big addition to the Genesis homebrew scene has been color hacks. These kinds of patches aim to bring the games more in line with their arcade counterparts or other versions of the game. Many of these can be extreme changes that are mostly personal preference as to whether they do what they claim, but some are absolute must-haves for a few games. Outrun for the Sega Genesis has always been overly dark, but its color hack brings back the bright, wonderful palette that is much more like the arcade original. The difference here is major and is the best way to play this version of the game. Another big color hack is for Castlevania Bloodlines and is again pretty major. It changes a lot of the colors to make the smaller details more apparent. Some stages are affected more than others, but it's a good way to experience this one all over again. Watching them side by side, I think I actually prefer the hack. Again, these color hacks are available for a bunch of games, and while some are better than others, they are worth checking out in case one catches you just right. As most of you know, hacks and translations are nothing new. Sonic hacks have been around for 20 years, and there are so many of those now I've lost count. These types of hacks aren't confined to the Sega Genesis, of course, and there are even some great ones for the Sega Master System, like adding a full FM soundtrack to Sonic. Many of these hacks can be gotten over at romhacking.net, who also has a browser-built patching system right there on the site. My advice is to make sure you are using the right version of a game with the right patch, as this is pivotal to the process. Patching the wrong version or the wrong region ROM will likely lead to an unplayable game. Hacks and translations also extend to Saturn and Dreamcast games, further providing access to things many of us couldn't enjoy before. But I'll save that one for another time. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.